The billionaire's empire was crumbling when an unexpected voice echoed through the federal courtroom. "I can defend him." The words were sharp, clear, and utterly impossible. Every head turned in disbelief. By the heavy oak doors stood a girl no older than 12, Abigail Miller, the maid's daughter. The defendant, billionaire Harrison Cole, froze in his chair, stunned. His high-priced lawyer had abandoned him hours before, leaving him alone to face the prosecutor's ruthless attacks. And now, against all reason, a child was offering to take his place. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The prosecutor scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. "This is a circus, a child. You can't be serious." But Abigail didn't flinch. Her small hands clutched a stack of papers, her eyes steady and unwavering. "I've read the case files," she said, her voice calm but fierce. "You're all looking at the wrong battlefield." The silence that followed was heavier than the marble walls themselves. Judges, jurors, and journalists leaned forward. How could a maid's daughter, barely 12, know anything about a case that had crushed the reputations of seasoned attorneys? What they didn't know was that Abigail had been watching, listening, and learning in the shadows for months. And on this day, in the most unlikely of places, the fate of a billionaire would hinge on the courage of a child no one had ever noticed before. The billionaire's empire was collapsing when an impossible voice echoed through the federal courtroom. "I can defend him." The words rang out, sharp and clear, silencing the room. Heads turned toward the oak doors, where a girl no older than 12 stood clutching the straps of a faded pink backpack. Abigail Miller, Abby, the maid's daughter. At the defense table, billionaire industrialist Harrison Cole froze. His face, pale from the day's disasters, twisted with disbelief and fury. His high-priced lawyer had abandoned him. Rumor said the man had fled the country with a hefty retainer, leaving Cole to face charges of corporate espionage and fraud alone. The press gallery erupted in cruel laughter. The cleaning lady's daughter, the case that had destroyed seasoned attorneys, was now left to a child. Judge Arthur Wallace banged his gavel, though even his stern gray face showed astonishment. "Order!" he barked, but his eyes lingered on the girl. Cole buried his face in his hands. This was the end, not with a dramatic clash, but with a joke. A child in court. Yet Abigail didn't flinch. She drew a steady breath, stepped forward, and locked her clear blue eyes on the judge. "Yes, Your Honor," she said firmly. "I can defend Mr. Cole." The prosecutor, Brenda Reed, shot to her feet. "Objection! This is a circus. The defense is mocking this court." "I am not," Abby replied, her tone calm and direct. The simple defiance startled Reed, and even Cole looked up, humiliated yet suddenly curious. "You should be at home playing with dolls," he snapped, but Judge Wallace raised a hand. His curiosity outweighed his disbelief. "What is your name, child?" "Abigail Miller, Your Honor." "People call me Abby." "And what makes you think you can defend a man in a multi-billion-dollar fraud case?" "I've read the case files," Abby answered. "My mother is Mr. Cole's housekeeper." His lawyer threw the files away. "I found them. And you're all looking at the wrong battlefield." The odd phrasing stilled the courtroom. Even the judge leaned closer. Abby lifted her chin. "My grandfather was General James Miller. He used to say, 'Never fight the battle your enemy expects. Find the one they don't know they're in.' Everyone's focused on the Titan contract and the forged signatures. But the war was lost in the supply lines." Gasps rippled through the room. Abby explained calmly that Peter Finch, Cole's assistant, had been meeting Titan executives for months, leaking information. The forged signature wasn't the first shot, it was the last. He was already surrounded. For the first time, the prosecutor faltered. The judge studied Abby in silence, the laughter in the gallery replaced by an uneasy respect. Finally, he spoke. "As Mr. Cole's counsel has failed to appear, the court faces a difficult position. Under my supervision, for this preliminary hearing only, I will allow Miss Miller to speak on his behalf." The prosecutor protested, but the judge silenced her. Cole stared at the girl, absurd, humiliating. Yet in his drowning desperation, she was the only lifeline offered. Slowly, he nodded. "Fine," he croaked. "Let the girl talk." Abby walked forward, her sneakers whispering across polished marble. She placed her worn backpack on the gleaming table beside Cole. For a fleeting moment, she looked as though she belonged. That night, in their cramped apartment, Susan Miller paced in shock. "Abby, I don't understand. Talking about battlefields, supply lines, that's just your grandpa's stories." "They're not just stories," Abby replied, sketching patterns on scrap paper. Strategy is seeing what others miss. Everyone looks at the middle of the case. I look at the edges. Her paper wasn't a doodle. Circles marked Cole, Titan CEO Marcus Thorne, and witnesses. A dotted line connected Finch, the assistant, directly to Titan. Abby tapped the gray circle. This is where we need to look. People like him don't disappear. They go somewhere. The next morning, she convinced Cole to let her search Finch's office. It was stripped bare, just as he had said, but Abby methodically examined every corner. In a forgotten trash can, she found a crumpled page with a crude bridge drawing and the numbers 4815. He drew this for a reason, she whispered. Grandpa said the truth hides in what people throw away. That night, the phone rang. Susan answered, trembling as Abby insisted on speaker. A distorted voice rasped through the line. Your daughter was loud in court. Some people don't like loud children. Tell her to stop playing in a grown-up's game or she'll get hurt. The line went dead. Susan's hand flew to her mouth. Abby sat still, her eyes sharp and calm. She knew then this was no game. The battle had only just begun. The medical bills on the counter suddenly seemed insignificant compared to this new danger. Susan trembled after the threatening phone call, but Abby calmly pinned the crumpled drawing of the bridge to the corkboard. At just 12 years old, her face held a determination far beyond her years. They're scared, she whispered, as though the threat confirmed she was on the right path. She recognized the bridge from memory and connected the strange numbers to a landmark she had once seen. The Westchester Arch Bridge, an old stone structure 30 miles north. Near it stood Archway Private Storage. Abby was certain Peter Finch had hidden his ammunition there. The next morning in court, Prosecutor Brenda Reed delivered a crushing presentation of emails, phone records, and expert testimony, painting Harrison Cole as a desperate fraudster who had forged a billion-dollar contract to save his collapsing empire. The room was grim, reporters scribbling as Cole sat motionless, his empire seemingly lost. When it was Abby's turn, she didn't deny the evidence outright. Instead, she explained calmly that every fortress had a secret door, something overlooked. She asked the handwriting expert peculiar questions, not about the signature itself, but about the ink, digital replication, and timestamps. Her words were not strong enough to dismantle Reed's fortress, but they created cracks. Then she made her boldest claim. The real evidence lay hidden in Storage Unit 4815 at Archway Private Storage, 30 miles away. Reed scoffed, laughing at the idea of a child basing a defense on a storage locker. But Judge Wallace, intrigued by her logic, ordered the unit to be unsealed and adjourned court for 24 hours. That afternoon, Abby rode silently beside Cole in a court-assigned car. He said nothing, staring out the window, while Abby studied Finch's crude sketch as if it were a treasure map. At Archway, a bailiff cut open the lock to reveal a nearly empty storage unit containing only a fireproof safe. Abby quickly dismissed the obvious number 4815 as too simple a code. Instead, she thought like Finch, recalling her grandfather's lesson that codes weren't about complexity, but memory. Searching her mind, she remembered the Westchester Arch Bridge plaque from her school trip. The year it was built, 1927. Slowly, she turned the safe's dial, 1927. With a heavy click, it opened. Inside lay a laptop and a thick manila envelope, immediately taken into evidence. Back in court the next day, the atmosphere was electric. The forensic team revealed that the laptop contained encrypted files documenting Peter Finch's betrayal. For over a year, he had sold Cole's trade secrets to Titan Corporation, keeping detailed ledgers, emails, recordings, and offshore banking records. The manila envelope contained the real contract along with digital scans of Marcus Thorne's signature, which Finch had used to create the forged one. The case against Harrison Cole collapsed instantly. Brenda Reed, humiliated, dropped the charges. The courtroom erupted in chaos as reporters rushed out, while Cole sat in silence, exhausted but free. For the first time, he looked at Abby not with disbelief, but with profound gratitude. As they left, Marcus Thorne's lawyer intercepted them, pretending his client, too, had been deceived by Finch. It was a transparent lie, a maneuver to cut losses. Before Cole could respond, Abby stepped forward, her small voice steady but sharp. "Tell Mr. Thorne," she said, "that my grandfather always said when you find one rat in the barn, you don't stop looking until you've found the nest." The lawyer's smirk faltered, genuine alarm flickering across his face. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Harrison Cole staring at the young girl who had not only saved his empire, but exposed a war no one else had dared to fight. Harrison Cole looked at Abby with a slow, genuine smile, the first she had ever seen from him. "Your grandfather and I would have gotten along well," he said quietly. That evening, Cole personally drove Abby and her mother home in his black Bentley, the car looking almost alien against their modest apartment building. Turning to Susan, he told her he knew about the crushing medical debts and that they were now paid in full. Susan broke down in tears of relief while Cole shifted his gaze to Abby. He offered her something extraordinary: leadership of his neglected foundation, a charitable trust meant to fund education and scholarships. Though only 12, Abby's mind, he said, was sharper than a room full of Ivy League degrees. She would decide where the money went, identifying children like her who saw the world differently and giving them a chance. Abby thought of her grandfather's lessons on strategy and truth. This was a new kind of war, one fought with opportunity, not weapons. With a small smile, she agreed. A month later, Abby stood in a corner office atop the Cole Industries Tower, her new nameplate reading Executive Director, the Cole Foundation. Her mother now worked there as well, leading community outreach, leaving behind her days of scrubbing floors. The foundation's first project was a sweeping investment in public school libraries, equipping them with cutting-edge technology. Abby personally vetted proposals, finding patterns and leverage points where money could make the greatest impact. One afternoon, Cole walked in with a newspaper reporting Titan Corporation's stock collapse amidst internal investigations. Marcus Thorne's empire was crumbling, just as Cole's once had. "Good," Abby murmured, eyes still fixed on the funding proposal in her hands. A structure built on lies will always collapse. Cole watched her with a mix of awe and gratitude. Over the following months, the Cole Foundation, under Abby's leadership, grew into a quiet but formidable force. Abby treated every grant like a battle plan. Her office became a war room, one wall covered with maps dotted by pins: red for underfunded schools, blue for community centers, yellow for families buried in medical debt. To Abby, these weren't statistics. They were territories to reclaim. Cole, once weary from corporate wars, now felt renewed, serving as her quartermaster and shielding her from skeptical board members wary of a 12-year-old calling the shots. When they criticized Abby's boldest initiative, the First Principles grant, direct aid to families on the brink, she dismissed their concerns. "People aren't liabilities," she told Cole. "They're frontline troops. If you don't give them supplies, the army collapses." The results proved her right. Families rescued from eviction and medical debt began to rebuild. Children returned to school, and lives stabilized. When the board demanded data, Abby pointed to letters of gratitude. Proof, she said, of missions successfully completed. Harrison read one about a family saved from losing their home, their son now thriving in school. Abby's reply was simple: "That boy may one day build a bridge or a hospital." That's our return on investment. We just think in longer timelines. Cole handled the board. Abby kept fighting, but enemies still lingered. Marcus Thorne had vanished from public life, his corporation dismantled. Yet Abby knew men like him never vanished completely. Soon, gossip columns and blogs launched smear campaigns, painting Cole as a puppet and Abby as a reckless prodigy. The very families the foundation helped became targets, harassed by landlords and neighbors. Susan saw it firsthand and warned Abby. Their good deeds were being twisted into weapons. Abby studied her wall map with a grim face. "It's an information campaign," she said. "Thorne's move. He can't attack us directly, so he's poisoning the battlefield." Cole wanted to sue, but Abby shook her head. "Grandpa always said you don't wrestle with the swamp, you drain it." Her plan was audacious. Instead of countering lies with legal battles, they would drown them in truth. She proposed a documentary series. Short, powerful films telling the real stories of the lives they had changed. Families freed from crushing debt, veterans regaining dignity, mothers escaping abuse. Cole immediately hired a top film crew, but Abby wasn't content to sit back. She stepped into the role of storyteller, interviewing families, shaping narratives, and turning the foundation's victories into undeniable proof. This was not charity. It was a new kind of campaign, and Abby was its general. Harrison Cole looked down at Abby, a slow smile spreading across his face. For the first time, she saw him truly smile. "I think your grandfather and I would have gotten along very well," he said softly. That night, he insisted on driving Abby and her mother Susan home. His black Bentley gleamed under the streetlights, pulling up like a spaceship outside their modest apartment. "Susan," he said, his voice steady but warm. I owe you and your daughter more than I can ever repay. I know about your medical debts. Consider them paid in full. Tears filled Susan's eyes, relief breaking over her like a wave. She tried to speak, but Harrison stopped her gently. You don't have to say anything. Then he turned to Abby. I have a proposition for you. I've neglected my charitable foundation for years. I want you to run it. Run it? Abby blinked. But I'm only 12. You have a mind that sees what others miss, Harrison replied. That perspective is worth more than a dozen Ivy League degrees. I'll handle the legal side, but I want you to decide where the money goes. Find the kids like you, the ones who see the world differently, and give them a chance. Think of it as your new battlefield. Abby thought of her grandfather, General Iron Jim Miller. He had taught her that real wars weren't fought only with weapons, but with truth, strategy, and vision. She smiled faintly. Okay, I'll do it. A month later, Abby stood in a glass-walled office atop the Coal Industries Tower. On her desk was a plaque, Abigail Miller, Executive Director, the Coal Foundation. Her mother now worked there too, as head of community outreach. No more scrubbing floors in silence. Their first project, reviving neglected public school libraries with state-of-the-art technology. Abby pored over every proposal, mapping out where resources would make the biggest difference. When Harrison walked in one day holding a newspaper, his voice was grim. Have you seen this? Titan Corp's stock is collapsing. Marcus Thorne's empire is crumbling. Abby didn't look up. Good, she said flatly. A structure built on lies will always collapse. Harrison realized then, this 12-year-old wasn't just saving him. She was dismantling his enemies quietly and completely. 6 months later, the Coal Foundation had become a force. Abby ran it like a general runs a war room. Maps covered her walls, red pins for struggling schools, blue for crime-ridden neighborhoods, yellow for families drowning in medical debt. She called them territories to be won back. The board of directors scoffed at taking orders from a child, but Harrison defended her fiercely, and Abby proved them wrong. When the foundation launched its boldest initiative, the First Principles Grant, which gave direct aid to families on the brink, the board balked. But Abby was firm. People aren't liabilities. They're soldiers on the front line. If you don't supply your troops, the whole army collapses. She backed it up with proof. A boy whose family they'd saved was now thriving in school, dreaming of building bridges one day. But not everyone celebrated their victories. Councilman Robert Morrison, a rising political star, stepped into the spotlight. At a press conference, he declared, "The Coal Foundation acts like a rogue state. Millions poured into communities without oversight. It's dangerous, unaccountable, and reckless." Harrison scowled at the screen. "He's twisting our greatest strength into a weakness." Abby studied Morrison closely. His tone, his smile, it was too perfect. "Grandpa said always know your enemy's supply lines," she whispered. "Morrison needs votes and donors. Let's follow the money." For days she worked in silence, mapping connections between his speeches and real estate deals. Finally, she showed Harrison her board. Morrison was tied to Argent Properties, a shell company quietly buying land in the very neighborhoods the foundation was saving. Their plan was simple: discredit the foundation, destabilize families, then gentrify the land for luxury condos. Harrison's face darkened. Classic raider tactics, and I'll bet if we dig deep enough, Thorne is behind it. Abby shook her head. Thorne was the old war. This is the new one, and we won't fight on his terms. We won't attack his fort. We'll make it irrelevant. Her plan was bold. First, fortify their position. The foundation would release new films, not about individuals, but about the neighborhoods themselves. Block parties, small businesses, community gardens. A reminder that these weren't blighted zones, but living communities worth defending. The second prong? A counterattack so audacious, even Harrison was stunned. Abby wouldn't just expose Morrison. She would outmaneuver him with the one thing politicians fear most: truth. Wrapped in hope, the child who once whispered, "I can defend him," in a federal courtroom was now preparing to defend entire communities. And for the first time, Harrison Cole knew she wasn't just his savior. She was his general,